The mirror in my room was new. That's what got me first, before anything else. Before the shapes, before the wrong rooms, before I stopped being able to trust flat glass. The mirror was new, and nothing else in that building had been new since maybe 1978. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. My name is Marcus Kane. I'm 34. Up until about 14 months ago, I was living in a residential advisor room at a federal Job Corps campus in the Pine Barrens of southern New Jersey. Pinevale Career Center. Not the real name, but close enough. The kind of place most people drive past on the state highway without knowing it's there. Brick buildings behind a tree line. Government signage you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. I took the job after the distribution center I'd worked at for 6 years shut down its South Jersey operation. I'd been a warehouse supervisor. Good at it, too. But the building closed, the severance was thin, and my wife and I had already been living in separate rooms for the better part of a year by then. She moved back to her mother's place in the next county over. I moved into a 10 by 12 room with a metal bed frame, a pressboard desk, and a mirror bolted to a cinder block wall. It wasn't a bad gig, honestly. Overnight RA for the male residential building, Building C. 240 beds designed for young men aged 16 to 24 in various vocational training programs. Except enrollment had been dropping for years, and by the time I started, we had maybe 70 residents spread across the first 2 floors. The third floor was mothballed. Locked stairwell doors, lights off, heat reduced to just above pipe freezing temperature. Half the second floor was empty too. I shared overnight coverage with a guy named Phil Roebuck, who'd been there 11 years and mostly sat in the ground floor office watching cooking shows on his phone. Phil covered the first floor. I covered the second. The third floor wasn't anyone's responsibility because officially no one was up there. I should say something about the building so you can feel what it was like. Building C was a 3-story rectangle, maybe 200 feet long, built in that flat, federal style where everything's designed to be maintained cheaply and replaced never. Cinder block walls painted cream. Linoleum floors in a color I'd call medical tan. Drop ceilings with fluorescent panels, half of which buzzed and a third of which were burned out at any given time. The hallways were wide enough for 2 people to pass without touching, but felt narrow because the ceiling was low and the light was bad. Every resident room had the same layout: bed, desk, closet alcove with no door, and a mirror. The mirrors were bolted directly to the wall. Industrial glass, steel-backed, about 18 by 24 inches. No frames. No medicine cabinets behind them. Just flat, reflective surfaces, lag-bolted into cinder block. The whole building had a smell. Every institutional building does, but this one's was specific. A cleaning solution that the janitorial crew used on everything. Floors and walls and bathroom tile. Something with a pine chemical edge that sat in your sinuses. Underneath that, if you breathed deep, mildew. Old mildew, the kind that's in the concrete itself. You'd stop noticing after an hour, and then you'd step outside for a breath and come back in, and it would hit you fresh. I drank a lot of coffee on shift, partly to stay awake, partly because holding the cup near my face gave me something else to smell. I'm a creature of habit. Always have been. Even when my marriage was falling apart, I kept the same morning routine. Coffee, 2 eggs, the sports channel with the volume low. At the campus, I developed a shift routine fast. Clock in at 10 p.m., walk the second floor hall, check the bathroom, check the common room, make sure no one's propped open the emergency exit for a smoke break. Back to my room by 10:40. Read for a while. Walk the hall again at midnight, again at 2, again at 4. Lights on wake up was 6 a.m., and the day shift RA took over at 6:30. Simple work. Mostly nothing happened. The first week was fine. Quiet. The residents were teenagers and young adults. and most of them were too tired from welding or CNA coursework to cause problems at night. A couple noise complaints, one homesick kid I sat with in the common room until he stopped shaking. Normal human stuff. I started sleeping pretty well in my little room. The mattress was bad, but I'd slept on worse. I kept the desk lamp on because the overhead fluorescent had a flicker that gave me a headache. It was during my second week that I noticed the mirror. Not what was in it, the mirror itself. I was hanging a towel on the back of my door. I'd brought my own towel because the issued ones felt like sandpaper, and I caught the mirror's edge in my peripheral vision and something registered. I walked over and looked at it closely for the first time. The glass was clean, no scratches. The bolts holding it to the wall were shiny, not corroded, not painted over. The wall immediately around the bolts had fresh drill marks in the cinder block. I ran my thumb along the top edge. No dust. Every other fixture in that room was old. The bed frame had initials scratched into it. The desk had water rings from years of mugs. The closet rod was bowed in the middle from weight. But the mirror was new, recently installed. I noticed it the way you notice a clean patch on a dirty wall. It draws your eye because it doesn't match. I mentioned it to Phil the next morning during shift change. He was eating a granola bar and scrolling his phone. "Hey, you know if they replaced the mirrors in the RA rooms recently?" He looked up. "Replace them?" "Mine looks new. The bolts are clean." Phil chewed for a second. "They don't replace stuff here, Marcus. They repair stuff here. Big difference." He went back to his phone. "Probably just cleaned it. Maintenance does weird stuff when they're bored." That made enough sense. I dropped it. For another week, nothing. I did my rounds, drank my coffee, read a Lee Child novel someone had left in the common room. I called my wife once. Well, she was technically still my wife then. Short conversation. She asked if I was eating okay. I said yeah. She said her mother's hip was getting worse. I said I was sorry to hear that. We hung up without saying anything real. That's how it was between us by then. Two people going through the motions while the thing underneath had gone quiet. The first time I noticed something wrong in the mirror, I almost didn't register it. It was maybe 2:30 in the morning, early in my third week. I'd come back from a hall check and sat down at my desk to drink some water. The mirror was on the wall to my left, positioned so that if I turned my head, I could see most of the room reflected behind me, the bed, the closet alcove, part of the door. I glanced at it and looked away. Then I looked back. The desk chair in the reflection was pushed in, flush against the desk, but I was sitting in the chair. It was pulled out, with me in it. In the mirror, the chair was empty and tucked under the desk. I stood up, looked at the mirror straight on. The chair was now pulled out in the reflection, matching reality. My reflection was standing, just like me. I sat back down. The reflection sat down. Everything matched. I told myself it was a visual hiccup, tired eyes, the kind of thing that happens at 2:30 a.m. under bad lighting. I went to bed and didn't think about it again for 3 days. That's the honest truth, 3 days. Because that's how normal life works. You see something off, your brain files it under weird, and you move on. The second time was harder to file. Same room, same mirror. I was getting dressed after a shower, standing near the closet alcove in shorts and a t-shirt. I reached for a pair of socks from my duffel bag on the floor. When I straightened up, I glanced at the mirror. In the reflection, the closet alcove had something hanging in it. I turned around. The alcove was empty except for 2 shirts on the rod. They were still there, nothing else. In the mirror, there was a third shirt, darker, longer, hanging between the other 2. When I stepped closer to the mirror, the image corrected. The alcove showed only my 2 shirts. but I'd seen 3. For a clear, sharp second. 3. My hands were still holding the socks. I noticed them shaking. Not a lot, just a fine vibration, the kind you get when your blood sugar drops or you haven't eaten in too long. I put the socks down and pressed my hands flat on the desk until they stopped. I did what anyone would do. I checked the closet alcove, counted the shirts, touched them. 2. I went back to the mirror and stared at the reflection of the alcove for a full minute. 2 shirts, everything where it should be. I made myself a rule right then, and it was a stupid rule, but it made me feel better. Don't look at the mirror casually. If you look deliberately. Face it straight on. Don't catch it in the corner of your eye. That's where the distortions live, in peripheral glances. Just face the thing, or don't look at all. That rule held for about 5 days. During that stretch, I did something I probably should have done when I moved in. I walked the second floor more carefully. Not just the rounds, I really looked at the rooms. Most of the resident rooms were occupied, doors closed at night, but there were about 8 empty ones scattered along the hall. I started checking them. The empty rooms were identical to mine in layout. Same bed frame, same desk, same closet alcove, and the same mirrors. But those mirrors were old, scratched, bolts corroded green at the edges. Paint had been brushed right up to the glass years ago and was now flaking. I checked every one. 8 rooms, 8 old mirrors. Then I checked my room. New mirror, clean bolts, fresh drill holes. I got curious in a way I couldn't shut off. The next morning, before my shift ended, I walked to the maintenance office in the service building. A guy named Arturo was there, just clocking in. "Hey, you know who installed the mirror in C214, the RA room?" Arturo looked at me the way maintenance guys look at anyone who asks them about specific work orders, like I'd asked him to recall a particular raindrop. "Which building?" "C, second floor, room 214. The mirror in there looks new." He pulled up the work order system on a dusty desktop computer, typed something, scrolled. "Nothing on that room since a toilet valve replacement in 2019. "No mirror work?" "No mirror work anywhere in C." He looked at me. "Those mirrors have been there since the building was finished. They don't come out unless someone breaks one, and that gets reported as a property damage incident, not maintenance." Someone definitely installed a new mirror in my room. Arturo shrugged. "Then someone did it off the books. Wouldn't be the first time. We've had guys from the regional office come through and do little upgrades for inspection visits. Slap a new mirror up, replace a stained ceiling tile, make things look better for the report." That was plausible. I thanked him, walked back to Building C, feeling reasonable about the whole thing. But that night, I broke my own rule. It was around 1 a.m. I was reading. I'd switched to a Harlan Coben paperback, something about a missing person in the suburbs. I reached for my coffee mug without looking, missed, and turned my head toward the desk to find it. The mirror was in my line of sight. The bed in the reflection was made. I looked at my actual bed. Unmade, sheets twisted, blanket half on the floor, exactly how I'd left it when I got up for my shift. In the mirror, the bed was made, tightly, corners tucked, pillow centered, like a hotel bed or a military bunk. I stared at the reflection for 10 seconds, 15. The bed stayed made. I looked at the real bed, unmade. Mirror bed, made. I waved my hand. My reflection waved back normally. Everything else in the reflection matched. Just the bed was wrong. Then, while I was still watching, The reflected bed changed. The sheets shifted, wrinkled, went back to matching my actual unmade bed. It happened smoothly, like watching a time-lapse in reverse. 3 seconds and it matched. My jaw locked. I mean physically locked, like I was biting down on something hard and I had to consciously relax it. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I put my book down, walked to the mirror, pressed my palm flat against the glass. It was cold. Not unnaturally cold, just the temperature of a room that never gets enough heat. I felt the surface. Smooth, solid, normal glass. My reflection pressed its palm against mine. I pulled my hand back. My reflection pulled back. Everything synced. I didn't sleep that night. Sat at the desk with my back to the mirror and waited for 6 a.m. The next morning, I reported the mirror issue to Janet Heller, the campus residential coordinator. Janet was a tall woman in her 50s who'd been with the program for 20 years and spoke in the particular cadence of someone who has filled out 10,000 incident forms. You're saying the mirror in your room is showing distorted reflections. Not distorted exactly, it's showing things that aren't there, or showing things differently than they are. She typed something on her computer. You're sleeping okay? These overnight shifts can do a number on circadian rhythms. I'm sleeping fine. Have you been under unusual stress? Janet, it's a mirror. I'm not asking for a counseling referral. I'm asking if someone can look at it. She said she'd put in a maintenance request. I thanked her and went to bed. 3 days later, a facilities guy I didn't recognize showed up at my door. He looked at the mirror for about 30 seconds, pressed on it, checked the bolts, and shrugged. Might have a slight convex warp. Happens with cheaper glass. Can make things look like they're shifted a little. We can swap it out, but it'd have to get sourced from the regional warehouse, and that takes a few weeks. A convex warp makes an unmade bed look made. He looked at me. It can mess with how things appear at certain angles, especially if the lighting's uneven. He pointed at my desk lamp. You're putting light on one side of the room and not the other. That'll amplify any distortion. I wanted to argue. I didn't. Because part of me, a big part, wanted him to be right. I wanted a convex warp. I wanted a simple material explanation that would let me keep sleeping in that room without my teeth locked together. Okay, I said. Let me know when the replacement comes in. He left. For almost a full week, nothing happened. I did my rounds, read my books, ate my meals in the cafeteria where the mashed potatoes came from a box, and the chicken was okay on Thursdays and terrible every other day. I started watching basketball highlights on my phone before bed. Normal stuff. The mirror showed me my room, accurately, every time I looked. I started to feel dumb, like I'd been the guy who calls the exterminator for a shadow. Then I made a mistake. Or I still don't know if it was a mistake, or if it was something I was going to do eventually no matter what. Maybe it was already decided. I went up to the 3rd floor. It was a Thursday night, around 11. Phil had called in sick, and they hadn't been able to get a replacement, so I was covering the whole building alone. The first 2 floors were fine, quiet, everyone in their rooms. I was heading back to the stairwell when I stopped at the 3rd floor landing. The door was a heavy fire door with a push bar, and it was supposed to be locked from the stairwell side. There was a sign, floor closed, no access, authorized personnel only. I pushed the bar. The door opened. The hallway was dark. Emergency exit signs at each end gave off a dull red glow. The smell up here was different. No pine cleaner, just the mildew underneath. Thicker, almost sweet. Cold air. The heat was minimal, like they'd said. I could see my breath. I used my phone flashlight. The hallway was identical to the 2nd floor in layout. Doors on both sides, numbered 301 through 324. Cream cinder block, tan linoleum. But it felt different in a way I'm going to try to describe accurately. It felt like a room where someone had just been standing. Not a presence exactly. I mean, the air felt recently displaced. Like if you walk into your kitchen and you can tell someone was just there, even though you can't see them or hear them. Something about the way the air settles after a body moves through it. I walked slowly down the hall. My footsteps sounded different up here, flatter. The drop ceiling seemed lower on this floor, or maybe it was the darkness pressing everything down. I checked the first room, 301. Door was open. Inside, bed frame, desk, closet alcove, all empty. No mattress, no furnishing, just the bones of the room, and a mirror, bolted to the wall. Old mirror, scratched, corroded bolts, normal for the building. I checked 302, same thing. 303, same. I was 5 rooms in before I found one that was different. Room 306. The door was closed. I tried the handle, unlocked, opened it. The room had a mattress on the bed frame. No sheets, no pillow, but a mattress. The desk had a lamp on it, unplugged, no bulb, but someone had placed it there deliberately. The closet alcove had 3 wire hangers on the rod, evenly spaced. And the mirror was new. Same as mine. Clean glass, shiny bolts, fresh drill holes in the cinder block. I stood in the doorway and felt something drop in my stomach. That elevator feeling, the split second where your body's still going down, but the floor has stopped. I stepped into the room and looked at the mirror. My reflection looked back. Phone flashlight in hand, jacket on, breath visible in the cold air. Everything matched. I scanned the reflected room behind me. Bed with bare mattress, desk with dead lamp, closet with hangers. Except the reflected closet had 4 hangers. I turned around. 3 hangers. I counted them twice. 3. Mirror, 4. Evenly spaced, like the 3, but with 1 more. I backed out of the room. My legs felt strange, not weak, but disconnected, like they were operating on a slight delay from what I was telling them to do. I pulled the door shut and stood in the hallway breathing that mildew air for a solid minute. Then I checked the next rooms. 307 through 312 were empty shells like the first few. 313's door was closed. Inside, mattress, desk lamp, hangers. New mirror. I didn't look at what the mirror showed. I just confirmed it was there and left. I found 3 more rooms like that on the 3rd floor. 306, 313, 318, and 322. 4 rooms, all with the same partial furnishing, mattress, dead lamp, hangers, and all with new mirrors identical to the one in my room. By the time I got back to the stairwell, my hands were trembling. Not the fine shake from before, a real tremor. I gripped the stair railing until my knuckles ached and just stood there. 5 new mirrors in a building where no mirror work had been ordered. 1 in my room, 4 in a closed floor nobody was supposed to access. The next day I went back to Arturo. I need to see the work orders for the 3rd floor of Building C. Anything in the last 2 years. He pulled them up. There were 7 entries. 2 were thermostat adjustments to keep the pipes from freezing. 1 was a pest control check. 2 were fire extinguisher inspections. 1 was a smoke detector battery replacement. The 7th was different. It was dated 11 weeks before I was hired. The description read, Mirror install C306, C313, C318, C322, C214. 5 rooms. 4 on the closed 3rd floor, 1 on the 2nd floor. My room. The requesting employee field listed a Job Corps staff ID number. I asked Arturo if he could look up who the number belonged to. He typed it in, stared at the screen, typed it again. "That's your ID number," he said. "What?" "Staff ID 20547. That's you. That's the number HR assigned you when you onboarded. The work order is from 11 weeks before I started." Arturo looked at me, then at the screen, then at me again. System glitch. These databases are 15 years old. Numbers get recycled. Someone who left probably had the same ID and it got reassigned to you. "Can you check?" He tried. The system showed no previous employee assigned that number, just me. My mouth went dry. Not a little dry, completely dry, like I'd been chewing cotton for an hour. I thanked Arturo and walked out without saying anything else. That night, I did something methodical. I brought a notebook and a tape measure to room 306. I drew the layout of the room, exact positions of the bed, desk, lamp, hangers. Then I stood in front of the mirror and wrote down what the reflection showed. Real room. 3 hangers in closet, bare mattress centered on frame, lamp on left side of desk. Mirror room. 4 hangers, mattress shifted about 2 inches toward the wall, lamp on right side of desk. Small differences, specific differences, not distortion. The mirror wasn't warping the image, it was showing an alternate arrangement. Like looking at a photograph of the same room taken on a different day after someone had rearranged things. I went to 313, drew the layout, checked the mirror. Same pattern, close to reality but with small, deliberate variations. An extra object here, a shifted position there. In 318, the mirror showed a pillow on the bed. There was no pillow in the real room. In 322, the mirror showed the desk drawer open about an inch. The real drawer was closed. I went back to my room and checked my own mirror. For the first time in a week, it was wrong again. The reflection showed a book on my desk that wasn't there. A hardcover, dark cover. I couldn't make out a title. My actual desk had my paperback and my coffee mug. The mirror added a book I didn't own. I wrote everything down. I drew the discrepancies in my notebook like a diagram. I'm not an artist, but I wanted a record. Something outside my own head that proved I was seeing what I was seeing. I put the notebook in my desk drawer and went to bed at 4 a.m. with the lamp on and the blanket pulled up to my chin like I was 6 years old. The next night is when the rule changed. I came on shift at 10, did my first round, normal. Came back to my room at 10:40, sat at the desk, glanced at the mirror out of habit, then stopped myself and faced it deliberately, the way I'd trained myself to do. The mirror showed my room, accurate. Bed, desk, me in the chair, lamp lit. Everything correct. Except on the desk, in the reflection, there was a notebook, open, with writing on the page. I looked at my actual desk. My notebook was in the drawer. I opened the drawer. It was there, closed, where I'd left it. In the mirror, the notebook was open on the desk. I leaned closer to the glass, trying to read what was on the reflected page. The writing was small. I couldn't make it out. Mirror writing is reversed and the angle was bad, but I could see that the handwriting was mine. I went to bed eventually, didn't sleep. Lay there watching the ceiling, listening to the building tick and settle, that particular sound old structures make in cold weather. Thermal contraction, pipes adjusting. But every sound landed differently now. Every creak sounded like a step. In the morning, I went up to the third floor again, room 306. The mattress had moved. Not dramatically, maybe 2 inches toward the wall, exactly the way the mirror had shown it the night before. I checked my notebook. I'd written it down. Mirror room. Mattress shifted about 2 inches toward the wall. And now the real mattress matched the mirror's version. I checked the closet. 3 hangers, not 4. That part hadn't changed yet, but the mattress had. Room 313. I checked. The desk lamp, which had been on the left side, was now on the right, matching the mirror. Room 318. The bare bed now had a pillow on it, a flat, yellowed institutional pillow that hadn't been there the night before. Room 322. The desk drawer was open about an inch. I stood in 322 and felt my breathing go shallow. Short, tight breaths like I was sipping air through a straw. I had to lean on the desk and force myself to slow down, to pull air deeper. The mirrors weren't reflecting reality. Reality was catching up to the mirrors, one day behind. What appeared in the reflection at night appeared in the room by morning. The reflections were showing the next version of the room. Or, and this is the thought that made me grip the desk harder, the reflections were showing what someone wanted the room to look like. And then that someone was coming in and making it match. I checked the hallway. No footprints in the thin dust on the linoleum. The fire door was still closed. I looked at the ceiling tiles, the walls, the floors. No sign of anyone coming or going. But things had moved. I went back to room 306 and stood in front of the mirror. The reflection showed the room behind me. Mattress against the wall, matching reality now. 3 hangers. But the lamp, which had been unplugged on the real desk, was plugged in and lit in the mirror. A dull yellow glow. In reality, there wasn't even a bulb in it. I checked the real lamp. No bulb. Unplugged. Cord coiled on the desk. The mirror showed it lit. I wrote it down. By tomorrow, the lamp would have a bulb and be plugged in and turned on. I was almost certain of it. That certainty? That was the moment I should have left. Not reported anything, not investigated further, not tried to understand. Just packed my duffel and driven away. But I didn't, and I need to be honest about why. It wasn't really the job. I could have found another job. It was the room. That sounds stupid, but after the separation, after losing the warehouse, after sleeping on my brother's couch for 2 months, that little cinder block box was the first space that was mine. Just mine. No shared bathroom, no borrowed sheets, no sleeping in someone else's living room. I had a door that locked, and a bed, and a desk, and quiet. Giving that up because of mirrors felt like giving up the last thing I'd managed to hold on to. So I stayed, and I kept checking. The next morning I went to 306. The lamp had a bulb. It was plugged in. It was on. Dim yellow light in an empty room on a closed floor. I unscrewed the bulb, put it in my pocket, unplugged the lamp, moved it to the opposite side of the desk, changed the arrangement deliberately. If the mirror was issuing some kind of preview, I wanted to see if I could disrupt it. If reality was following the mirror, I wanted to force a disagreement. That night, I checked 306's mirror again. The reflection showed the lamp on the side of the desk where I'd moved it. No bulb, unplugged, matching what I'd done. And next to the lamp, a new object, a folded piece of paper. There was no paper on the real desk. I wrote it down, went to bed. Morning, room 306. On the desk, Next to the lamp, exactly where I'd repositioned it, a folded piece of paper. I picked it up. My hands were steady this time, and I think that scared me more than the shaking had. Because steady hands meant some part of me had started accepting this. The paper was lined, torn from a legal pad. On it, in pencil, in handwriting that was close to mine but not exactly mine, slightly more upright, slightly more deliberate, the way you'd write if you were carefully imitating someone's hand, was a single line. Thank you for the bulb. I put the paper down, walked out, went downstairs, made coffee in the break room, drank it while staring at the microwave clock until my shift ended. I didn't tell anyone about the note. Who would I tell? Janet would send me to counseling. Phil would think I was losing it. Arturo would shrug and blame the database. I was alone with this in a way I hadn't been alone with anything before, and I'm including the divorce. At least with the divorce, there were lawyers and paperwork and other people who acknowledged the situation existed. This was just me and 5 mirrors, and a thank you note written in almost my handwriting. For 2 days, I didn't go to the 3rd floor. I avoided looking at my own mirror. I covered it with a t-shirt, tucked the fabric behind the top bolts, went about my shifts, did my rounds, read my book, tried to pretend the 3rd floor wasn't up there being rearranged one piece at a time. On the 3rd night, I took the t-shirt off the mirror. The reflection showed my room. Accurate, as far as I could tell. Same mess, same mug, same book on the desk. But then I noticed something on the reflected bed. A shape on the pillow. Small, dark. I looked at my actual pillow. Nothing. In the mirror, it looked like a hair. A single long, dark hair curled on the white pillowcase. My hair is short. Light brown, going gray. I don't have long, dark hair. Nobody had been in my room. I wrote it down. In the morning, I checked my pillow. There it was. One long, dark hair, almost black, curled in the exact position the mirror had shown. That's when I started testing the mirrors differently. Not trying to break the pattern, trying to understand it. I went back up to the 3rd floor. I stood in each of the 4 rooms and cataloged exactly what the mirrors showed versus what was really there. I measured positions with my tape measure. I photographed the real rooms with my phone. I was systematic. I needed to be. Systematic felt like control, even if it wasn't. Over the next week, this is what I found. The mirrors weren't just adding objects. They were building rooms. Each night, the reflection showed 1 or 2 more details than reality. A blanket folded at the foot of a bed, a cup on a desk, a pair of shoes in the closet alcove. And each morning, those details materialized. Not big things, small domestic items. The kind of things that accumulate when someone lives somewhere. A toothbrush in 313, a magazine in 318, a jacket on the back of the door in 322. The rooms on the 3rd floor were being furnished, slowly, silently, one reflection at a time. And here's what made my throat close. The items were familiar, not generically institutional, specifically familiar to me. The jacket in 322 was the same brand and color as one I'd owned in my 20s. The magazine in 318 was about freshwater fishing. I used to fish with my father on the river every October before he passed. We'd drive out to this bend near Clarkson where the bass were always too small, but we went anyway. The toothbrush in 313 was green. I always buy green toothbrushes, always have. No reason, just habit. My wife used to tease me about it. The kind of detail nobody would know unless they'd lived with me or been inside my head. Someone, something, was building rooms that looked like my rooms. 5 rooms that were slowly becoming versions of places I might live. Not copies of my current room, variations, like someone studying the idea of me and trying different arrangements. One night, around 2 a.m., I was in room 318, comparing the mirror's reflection to reality. The mirror showed the bed made up with a blue blanket I recognized, same shade as the one on the bed I'd shared with my wife before the separation. In the real room, the bed was still bare, except for the pillow that had appeared earlier. I was writing in my notebook when I heard something, not from the hallway, from inside the wall, behind the mirror. A faint sound, rhythmic, slow. It took me a few seconds to place it. Breathing. Not mechanical, not a pipe or a vent. Breathing. The slow, even respiration of someone sleeping. I stepped closer to the mirror, pressed my ear to the glass. The breathing was clearer. Behind the mirror, in the 2-inch gap between glass and cinder block, something was breathing. I pulled back, stared at the mirror. My reflection stared back. Behind my reflected self, the room in the mirror showed the blue blanket on the bed, the pillow, the fishing magazine on the desk. The breathing stopped. I didn't run. My legs wouldn't have cooperated if I'd tried. I walked out of 318 slowly, pulling the door shut, and went downstairs. I made it to my room before my knees gave and I sat down hard on the bed. 2-inch gap. The mirrors weren't flat against the cinder block. They were mounted with spacers, standoffs behind each bolt. I'd felt it when I pressed my palm against my own mirror weeks ago. A slight give, the glass not quite touching the wall. I'd thought nothing of it. I'd described it to myself as practical, simple. I'd appreciated it. Every mirror on that floor, every mirror in my room, had a space behind it, and something in at least one of those spaces was breathing. The next day, I should have gone to Janet. I should have gone to the campus director. I should have filed something, called someone, made it someone else's problem. Instead, I went to the hardware store in town and bought a flashlight with a narrow beam and a dental mirror. One of those little angled mirrors on a stick that dentists use to see behind your teeth. That night, after my midnight round, I went to room 318. I slid the dental mirror into the gap between the wall mirror and the cinder block, angling it to see into the space behind. I need to be careful here because I've spent months trying to find the right words for this, and I still haven't. The space behind the mirror was not 2 inches deep. The dental mirror showed depth, real depth, extending beyond what the flashlight could reach. And what I was looking at wasn't a cavity in the wall. It was a room. The back of the mirror, from the other side, was transparent, like a window. And through that window, I could see a room that had the same shape as 318. The same dimensions, but it was full. Furnished. Bed made with the blue blanket. Desk with items on it I couldn't quite make out. Closet with clothes hanging. A lived-in room. A warm-looking room. The light in there was soft, amber, like a table lamp turned low. And on the bed, under the blue blanket, there was a shape. Person-sized. Lying on their side, facing away from the mirror. The shape was breathing. I pulled the dental mirror out so fast I scraped it against the bolt head, dropped it on the floor. Stood there with my flashlight aimed at the wall mirror, which showed me my own reflection. A man who looked like he'd just grabbed a live wire. Wide eyes, pale face, mouth open with no sound coming out. I left the 3rd floor. I went to my room. I sat on the bed and stared at my own mirror on the wall, and I thought about the 2-inch gap behind it. I thought about what might be on the other side of my mirror. in a room that looked like mine but fuller, warmer, more lived in a bed that looked like my bed but made up properly, with a pillow that wasn't flat and a blanket I recognized from a life I didn't have anymore. I didn't use the dental mirror on my own wall. I couldn't bring myself to. Not that night. Not ever. I called in sick the next day, stayed in town, sat in a diner and ate pancakes at 2 in the afternoon and watched trucks go by on the state highway and tried to think clearly. What I kept coming back to was the work order. 5 mirrors, installed using my employee ID, 3 weeks before I was hired. Someone had ordered these mirrors placed in specific rooms, 4 empty, 1 assigned to whoever the next overnight RA would be, and tagged the order with an ID number that wouldn't exist until I walked into HR and signed my paperwork. That's not a database error. That's not a recycled number. That's someone getting ready for me. I went back to the campus that evening, not to my room, to the administrative building where the HR office was. The building was locked after 5, but my staff keycard opened the main door. I went to the file room. Job Corps keeps paper records alongside digital, federal requirement. I pulled my own personnel file. Standard stuff: application, background check, references, hire date, ID assignment, everything normal. Then I searched for any previous employee with ID 20547. I went through the file cabinets for 2 hours. Former employees were filed alphabetically by last name with their ID numbers on the folder tab. I went through every drawer, every cabinet. No one had ever been assigned 20547 before me. The number was created the day I was hired, but the work order used it 3 weeks earlier. I put the files back, locked up, walked to Building C in the dark, through the pine trees, the air smelling like cold sand and resin. My room was exactly as I'd left it. Mirror on the wall, t-shirt draped over it from when I'd covered it before. I pulled the t-shirt off. The mirror showed my room. The bed, the desk, everything correct. Except sitting on the edge of the reflected bed, hands on reflected knees, looking at the mirror from the other side, was a man. He looked like me. Not exactly. The details were off in small ways, like the rooms had been off. His hair was slightly longer. He was wearing a shirt I didn't own, a dark green Henley. His posture was looser than mine, more relaxed, like someone settled into his space. He was looking at the mirror, at me, with an expression I can only call patient. Not threatening, not smiling, just patient. Like he'd been sitting there and didn't mind the wait. I was standing in my room looking at the mirror. He was sitting on the bed in the mirror looking back. We were in the same room, but we weren't. My chest seized. The muscles between my ribs clamped, and I couldn't pull air for what felt like 10 seconds. When the breath finally came, it came in a gasp, loud in the quiet room, and he, the man in the mirror, tilted his head slightly at the sound, like he'd heard it through the glass. I didn't move. I couldn't. I stood there, and he sat there, and we looked at each other through 18 by 24 inches of steel-backed glass. Then he stood up, slowly, walked to the mirror, stood where I was standing, on his side. We were face to face, inches apart, separated by the glass. I could see the details now. My face, almost. The nose was the same, the jaw, but his eyes were steadier, calmer. There was no fear in them. He looked like a man who'd been waiting for this moment and had already decided it was going to go well. He raised his right hand, slowly, and placed his palm flat on his side of the glass. I didn't raise mine. My arms wouldn't move. We stood there for I don't know how long, a minute, 2. Then he lowered his hand, turned, and walked back to the bed. Sat down, rested his hands on his knees, patient again. I pulled the t-shirt back over the mirror, dragged the desk in front of it, pushed the desk hard against the wall so the fabric was pinned and the glass was covered and blocked. I sat on the bed and I stayed awake until 6 a.m. The next day I told Janet I needed a room transfer. She asked why. I said the mirror was bothering me. The warped glass, the replacement hadn't come yet. I wasn't sleeping well. She gave me room 208, 4 doors down the hall. I moved my duffel bag, my books, my coffee mug, left the mirror covered and the desk pushed against the wall in 214. Didn't look back. Room 208 had an old mirror, scratched, corroded bolts, paint flaking at the edges. I checked it that first night. It showed my room accurately, no discrepancies. I slept for the first time in 10 days. Deep, heavy, dreamless sleep. Woke up feeling almost human. For 4 days, room 208 was normal. The mirror was just a mirror. I started to believe it was over, that whatever was wrong was specific to those 5 installations, to the new mirrors and whatever had been set up behind them. The old mirrors were just glass, regular glass on regular cinder block. Nothing behind them but wall. On the 5th morning, I woke up and looked at the mirror. A book was on the reflected desk. A dark hardcover, the same one I'd seen weeks ago in the mirror of my old room. There was no book on my actual desk. The old mirror, the one that had been there since 1978, with its scratched surface and corroded bolts, was doing it now. I need to tell you what I did next because it's important and it's not what you'd expect. I didn't panic. I didn't run. I sat on the bed and looked at the mirror and I said out loud to the room, "What do you want?" Nothing happened. The reflection didn't change. No voice answered. But saying the words did something inside me. It cleared something away. It made me stop trying to explain what was happening and just look at what I knew. The mirrors were being used to build rooms. 5 rooms at first, furnished slowly through reflections that reality followed one day behind. Rooms filled with items from my life, my habits, my memories. Someone on the other side, behind the glass, in that impossible depth, was assembling a version of a life that looked like mine. And now, it didn't need the new mirrors to do it. The old ones worked too, which meant it wasn't about the mirrors at all. It was about me being in the room. I was the thing that made the surface work. I was the thing the mirrors needed on this side. That's as close as I can get to understanding it. I'm not a scientist. I'm not even a particularly smart guy. I'm a man who stocked shelves and supervised loaders and slept in a cinder block room. But I know what I saw. And I know what it means when something starts building a place that looks like your life, one piece at a time, in a room you can almost reach but can't quite enter. It means someone's making space, getting ready, settling in. That was my last night at Pinevale. I didn't give notice. I packed my bag at 6:15 a.m. when the day shift RA arrived, and I drove to my brother's place in Millburn and slept on his couch again. Told him the job wasn't working out. He didn't push. Good man, my brother. Always has been. He handed me a beer and turned on the TV and let me sit there without explaining anything. I found another job within 2 weeks. Stockroom at a building supply company. Nothing special, but it came with a paycheck and no mirrors in the back room. I got a small apartment in town, 2nd floor of a converted house. Old place, hardwood floors, drafty windows. The bathroom had a medicine cabinet with a mirror. The bedroom closet door had a full-length mirror on it. First 3 weeks, nothing. Normal reflections, accurate rooms. I checked every morning, every night. Deliberate looks, straight on, the way I'd learned. Nothing wrong. I started to ease up, started to think distance mattered, that whatever was happening at Pinevale was rooted in that campus, those buildings, that specific patch of pine barrens. This morning I woke up and went to the bathroom, opened the medicine cabinet to get my toothbrush, closed it, looked at the mirror. Everything matched. Sink, towel rack, my face, the doorway behind me showing the edge of the bedroom. Except on the shelf inside the reflected medicine cabinet, the glass shelf visible through the closed cabinet door, there was an object that shouldn't have been there. A green toothbrush, standing upright in a small ceramic holder I've never owned. I only have one toothbrush. It was in my hand. I opened the cabinet, one shelf, my toothbrush holder, my toothpaste, nothing else. I closed it and looked at the reflection again. The green toothbrush was there, on the shelf, in a holder that doesn't exist in my bathroom. And behind me, in the reflected bedroom visible through the bathroom doorway, just for a half second, just before I looked away, I saw the edge of a dark green Henley draped over the back of a chair. I don't own a chair in my bedroom. I don't own a green Henley. But he does. And he's furnishing.